All right, welcome to our presentation today. We are so excited to have you join WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions and the Alliance for Ethical Recruitment Practices in this presentation today. While you are joining us, feel free to share what country in the chat that you are joining us from. My name is Beth Vanderwalker. I'm the Vice President of WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions. I am also an RN. I've been an RN here for 25 years. I'm so excited for this presentation today. So I met Mukul and Dr. Schaefer back in 2018 in a very similar presentation that they did back then. And when I heard the message from that organization, this is a message that I knew was so important for WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions to join. And so we were eager to become a certified organization with the Alliance. The Alliance for Ethical Recruitment Practices is a division of CGFNS, and their main goal is to ensure that foreign educated professionals are recruited in a fair and ethical manner. So a couple of housekeeping items. We want you to know that there are going to be files uploaded in the chat for you today. You can go to those files. We are recording this presentation today, and we are going to share that recording with everybody that has registered for this. And please stay with us all the way to the end, because we're going to have a question and answer at the end. So with that, I am really excited to introduce two of our amazing presenters today. The first being Mukul Bakhshi. He is the director of the Alliance of Ethical Recruitment Practices, and with him is Kaley Cook. And Kaley is an Alliance program coordinator. So welcome to both of you. Good morning here in the U.S.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth, and for that introduction. And thank you all for being here today. It's whatever time it is. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and very excited to share this message. And we're just to start out, this is a start of a conversation. So hopefully you'll learn something new today, but you might have particular questions. And so that's what, as Beth said, we have the Q&A coming up, but also, we'll put our email address for Kaley as our program coordinator if there are questions about your personal experience in making the best decision for you. We know that, depending on where you are in the process, you're making some major life decisions for your career, for your family, about where you want to live or where you want to work. And hopefully what we talk about today will help you make those decisions in the best way you can. I also want to thank Ron Hoppy, the CEO, for inviting us, and Beth. It's been wonderful to work with her. She is a member of the Board of Governors for the Alliance, and so she's really committed to ensuring that the experience for health professionals coming to the U.S. is as ethical, fair, and transparent as possible. So we're going to talk about a couple things today. So the first is CGFNS, that organization, and the migration process. Then I'm going to have Kaley talk about protecting and securing the labor rights of nurses coming to the United States. And then finally, we're going to talk about, what does that mean to you? And discussion and an opportunity for you to provide questions and answers. And we mentioned earlier that there'll be a couple files uploaded. That includes this presentation for your reference. We'll also provide the code that I'll reference. And that code outlines the rights and responsibilities of health professionals coming to the U.S. under our alliance. So, we just mentioned the CGFNS Alliance. So what are these organizations? Well, CGFNS, at a high level, we enable professionals to bring and use their education and experience across borders. CGFNS was founded in 1977. And if your journey about where you're living to live in the U.S., it's likely you'll be encountering us. In two pieces. One is for immigration to the U.S. We are the ones providing the visa screen program for USCIS, our citizenship services, etc. We also do it for licensure for states. So if CGFNS is enabling you to bring your experience and use it in the U.S., the Alliance is the flip side. We want to make sure that happens fairly and ethically, as defined by our code. And the Alliance has been a part of CGFNS since 2014. So CGFNS, as I said, ensures that qualified professionals like yourselves can bring your skills and experience to the U.S. And so CGFNS was founded in 1977 by the American Nurses Association and the National League for Nursing, which are two large U.S. nursing organizations. In 1996, as I mentioned, we now have a visa screen process for U.S. immigration. And regardless of that, CGFNS may be part of your journey for either immigration or for licensure to practice to states in the U.S., Canada, and New Zealand. Okay. So I just thought I'd spend a moment outlining this process of what it looks like at a high level. One thing, if you've started your journey in working with a recruitment agency like a staffing or placement firm, is that there are a lot of steps in this process. And so, just from a kind of regulatory perspective, first there's of course a background check done by USCIS and Homeland Security. Then we look at your credentials, right, to verify that you have the licenses or the degrees from the school you say. And so we look at those transcripts and stuff. And then, of course, there might be an English language component, depending on what country you're coming from. If it's a country that is, exempt from English language, you don't have to take that. But otherwise, something like IELTS or TOEFL. And then you'll take a board exam, either CP, which is a program by CGFNS for visa screen, or the NCLEX, which is the board exam that nurses take. And if you're coming from another professional background, it varies, but the process might look overall similar. Then, of course, we do the credential evaluation, whether that be for immigration or for licensure. So that's kind of a very high-level overview of the process. Of course, when you're working with a recruiter, there's steps on both ends, right? So before you even get there, there's screening to make sure that you're eligible, applying for everything. And then once you have your license, it's getting you to an employer for you to work and live in the U.S. And just to understand the trends, you can see, over the last few years until, of course, last year with the COVID pandemic, there's been a pretty significant upswing in the number of nurses who have taken the NCLEX, the board exams, to be a nurse in the U.S. And this is kind of a good a way to show the trend that there are more foreign educated health professionals coming to the U.S. Obviously, 2020 was a dip, but we expect that the number of health professionals coming to the U.S. to increase. Demand, of course, for health professionals like nurses is extremely high in the United States and around the world right now. One thing I want to know is this is a complicated chart. You're like, what is all these lines? What I wanted to note is that depending on the timing of when you're going through this process and where you're coming from, waiting periods for visas vary greatly. And just to show you, just from a trend perspective, if you're coming from India for the EB3 visa, the green card visa that's used by a lot of nurses coming to the US, the wait right now is almost 10 years. If you're coming from the Philippines, it's about a year right now, and it's varied a bit over the last few months. So just recognize that there can be a long process to go through. And just in terms of the visa categories, again, if you're working with a recruiter or an immigration lawyer, they can walk through the different options. But generally, most nurses are coming under green card visas. These are visas that allow you to permanently reside in the U.S. And so these are the kind of the ones that are most popular. The other visas are TN visas, which are for Canadians and Mexicans under the trade NAFTA agreement, now USMCA. And there are other visas like H-1B for other types of categories like advanced practice nurses and physical therapists, etc. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kaley. And again, if you have questions, we talked about the process at a very high level, but we'll be happy to talk about that more in the Q&A. Kaley?
Great. Thank you, Mukul. So we're going to move into talking about protecting and securing the labor rights of nurses in the U.S. So first, I wanted to just go through a few of the initiatives that work together to promote ethical health professional recruitment right now. So you can see there are a lot. There's a Global Compact for Migration, IRIS, as well as the WHO actually has guidelines on this recruitment as well. But one of the things about all of these organizations is that a lot of them exist for member states or for countries, and they don't provide specific guidelines. And that's something that the Alliance is very well positioned to do, is provide some of that more specific implementation of some of those guidelines into one country, in this case, the United States, and make sure it's meeting the requirements for things like immigration. So the Alliance Code is a multi-stakeholder effort that's designed to maximize the benefit of this recruitment and to mitigate the harm. And it's a voluntary agreement that sets up best practice standards to guide the fair, transparent, and ethical recruitment of foreign educated health professionals into the United States. It was developed by voices from across the process, from recruiters and employers to nursing organizations and labor. And the reason that we think a code is really important is because health professionals that do not understand their legal obligations and responsibilities can be subject to problematic recruitment provisions, leading to things like breaches and underutilization. And really, all stakeholders, including the recruiters, benefit when these expectations are aligned and people have independent resources. So for example, I just want to provide a little bit of information about what is included in the code. And the code covers a lot of these rights and responsibilities. You're going to be getting a copy of it with the documentation for this presentation. So I encourage you to take a look at that and see what's inside. But just know it covers things like making sure that health professionals are able to look at their contract before they sign it, that they're able to review it. Things like that, that just set up those expectations for both sides to provide that extra dose of transparency. So the Alliance does its work in three main ways. And the first one is informing and empowering professionals to make informed career decisions. This is really important, especially if you're at the beginning of your journey and also throughout, to make sure that you have the information to make those choices. We also certify recruiters who agree to comply with the code. And they go through all those provisions and they have to document that they are upholding all of these provisions as well. And this is something that WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions has already done. They were just recertified last year, so they've gone through this process already. We also develop and share research on recruitment issues, and this allows us to see different trends that are going on, as well as look for problems and also successes. So we'll take a look at some of that in just a minute. The code balances stakeholder interests and seeks to maximize the benefits and mitigates the harm of migration. We know that migration is already occurring. We know that it's going to continue occurring. So we want to make sure that we're mitigating all of the harms that can come up during that process. So our preamble to the code addresses understanding the delicate balance between an individual's right to migrate as well as preserving a nation's workforce. So that's understanding the relationship between the foreign educated health professional, the source country, and the employer. And this can be a pretty delicate balance. So a couple of years ago, we updated the code to a rights-based framework that really emphasizes transparency at its core to make sure that all of those parties are going in with the same information. So as you're going through looking for a recruiter, if you're at that stage in your process, look for the Alliance seal. You can see it here. It should be on recruiters' websites, and it means that they've been certified by the Alliance, that they've been through that process, that they're upholding all the provisions that you'll find in the code that we require. So you can find more information at the CGFNS Alliance.org website, where you can find the list of certified recruiters. You can also see the healthcare code, which is also going to be distributed to you. And this is the email address you can contact if you have any questions. It's staff@cgfnsalliance.org. You can send any questions or concerns that you have there, and you're probably going to get a response from me. So this is just a quick look at some of the research that we've done over the past couple of years. A couple of years ago, CGFNS and the Alliance put out a survey asking individuals about their recruitment experience overall, and 2/3 of the respondents had a positive recruitment experience. You can see the breakdown here. 8% are saying negative, 6% are saying very negative, and 17% are saying neutral. Overall, we were really pleased with these results. We were expecting different ones, so that was great news. But I want to show you something else. So on the right here, you see that same chart that you saw on the previous slide. And on the left is a survey that we put out last year as part of our recertification process for different firms. So this does include WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions. And you can see that their results were overwhelmingly positive. 66% are saying they had a very positive overall experience, and only 3% are saying that they had a negative experience or a very negative experience. So at the Alliance, we were really pleased with these results last year. All of the firms that were surveyed have already been certified for a previous cycle. So we think it's really good enforcement that these provisions are working and that it's leading to better experiences for health professionals that are trying to come to the United States. So let's take a closer look at some of those numbers and look at some of the successes and some of the problems. So most foreign educated healthcare professionals to the United States are reporting that they received a copy of their contract at 98%, that they were able to review it at 97%, and that they knew their hourly wage before they came to the United States, which is at 85%. Those are all great. Those are great numbers, but we'd love to get them all to 100%. Now let's look at some of the problems. A small fraction are reporting that they paid a recruiter fee at 9%, that they had to provide collateral, which can mean putting up something to ensure that you complete your contract, and that can be something like your house or your car, and that's at 3%, as well as having documents withheld, which usually means your passport, also at 3%. So these numbers are pulled from a group that is all recruiters. It's not just Alliance certified. So it gives us a sense of kind of where we are with trends in recruitment and what issues that we at the Alliance need to be looking out for. So as you continue in your journey, there's a few things that you should look out for as well, whether you're looking for a recruiter or you're starting to go through a contract, or you want to just review a contract you already have. So these are some of the problems that can impede nurses in the pursuit of career success in the United States. The first one is the location issue or being forced to move. This can come up in a contract. Your contract might change locations and you might have to move, which can mean in certain cases uprooting your family. So that can be really hard for some nurses, as well as the issue of bench pay. This means if you had a contract at one hospital and that contract ends and you're being moved to another hospital, are you being paid in the interim time? That's something to consider in your contract as well. The term of your contract, typically we see 3 years for a contract term, and I think that's pretty standard. Anything more than that, and I would want to ask a couple of follow-up questions, but usually around or under the 3 years. Sufficient cultural and clinical orientation. This comes up a lot in our conversations with nurses, and it means having sufficient clinical orientation to the specific hospital and their processes, as well as cultural orientation, going over any differences in lifestyle or in cultural differences in nursing that can come up. And this gets mentioned by nurses sometimes that they don't feel that they get quite enough support in the beginning of their journey. Job alignment and progression is an issue that also comes up generally in recruitment, which is that you might not be placed in the specialty that you're focused on. You might be placed in a hospital doing something else, and that can impede nurses as they move through their career. This is something that you can maybe talk to your recruiter about, but it does come up for a lot of nurses that we speak to. There's also the issue of breach fees. Breach fees are very standard. They're in most contracts, I think all the contracts I've seen, but there's something that you definitely want to be aware of. This is when we're talking about making sure that everyone's going in with equal levels of information. This is something we want to make sure nurses understand. It is usually in most American contracts, but it can be a large amount of money. And what it is the amount of money that you pay if you breach your contract before the term, so before those 3 years are over. The breach fee would be the amount that you would pay. So knowing what that amount is, as well as knowing if it's a liquidated damage, which would be a set amount that's probably written in your contract, or an actual damage, which is calculated specifically to you. Knowing those numbers is really important because it can have a really big impact on your life going forward. So just want to note that when we do surveys, this is something that we do ask nurses, and a lot of them report that they don't know. So just make sure that you are aware of that as you're going through the process. And I'm going to hand it back over to Mukul now.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Kaley. That was a great description. And, if we go back and look at this list here, there's a lot of things here. And one of the most important things to know is that knowing upfront, make sure that your expectations are aligned. And a lot of what the Alliance Code is about is making sure there's transparency. So let's think about, kind of transition from kind of this overlay. What does this all mean to you, right? How do you make a decision that's best for you and your family about your career and where you want to be? And I guess the first question, should I use a recruiter? The question before that even is, where do I want to go, right? There's obviously some people want to stay in their home countries and, for all kinds of reasons. But if you decide you're considering migrating to another country, I think a question is where to go. The United States obviously is a very attractive country for a lot of reasons, both in terms of, people want to live here, and also wages tend to be relatively high compared to even other countries like in Europe, for example. But of course, the immigration timeline to the United States can be a lot longer than other countries. So thinking through some of those issues, both from a practical perspective and also the questions of where is the right place for me to live is, I think, a key part. Then the question is, you start thinking about that. Should I use a recruiter, right? And what does a recruiter do? Well, if you've heard of WorldWide, you're already familiar with some of the work that a recruitment firm does. And it starts with educating you through the process and kind of taking you through all the steps. So I guess, you have to make a determination about that. I would say for most people without additional support in terms of either family here or things of that sort, it's really difficult to navigate this process on your own. The benefit, though, of course, is if you are able to on your own, then you can work directly with an employer here. But practically speaking, the immigration process, the finding a position, the onboarding and orientation and support, it generally is helpful for many people to use a recruitment firm. Okay. Well, you might have heard the recruiters is kind of an overall term. There's different types, and two of them are staffing and placement firms, right? So what is the difference and what does it mean to you? Well, so a staffing firm, that's the predominant model in which most nurses who are using recruiters are coming to the US. And what that model is that you work for the staffing firm, and the staffing firm employs you and then hires you out to hospitals or nursing homes or other healthcare facilities during the term of your contract. A placement firm like WorldWide, they are working with a healthcare facility and having you employed directly by the healthcare facility. There are, definitely, differences with the approaches, but I will note this, that if you go and look at some of the issues that people had on the survey that we did a couple years ago, location issues and forced moves. Right? This is the situation where someone is, might be signing a contract to work anywhere in the United States. And they say, I have a cousin in Chicago, so I'd like to be there. And the staffing firm will be like, sure, we'll try to get you a contract there. But if there's no availability, then they might put you 3 hours away instead. And that's where the client is, because that's going to come first above your preference. Now, let's say you're like, I'm willing to work anywhere. Well, you might have a family. And so you work somewhere for 2 years. You're like, oh, well, I'm really getting settled here. I'd like to live here after my contract ends. But their contract with the hospital ends. Well, now they're like, hey, for the last year of your contract, you need to move to another state where we can find you a position. It might be hard at that point to uproot your family. Bench pay, finding position when you're in between positions. So those two things are kind of avoided with the placement firm model, because you'll have a direct employer for whom you're working. There's also benefits, I think, in terms of the job alignment and progression piece, because you're building a career at a particular healthcare facility. So those are things to think about when you're thinking about, what the model of the firm you're working with is. Is it a staffing firm where you'll be working at different client hospitals? Is it with a placement firm where you'll be working with an employer long-term? And what the benefits of each approach are. Those are things to think about. Is my firm reputable? Is it certified by the Alliance? So, the recruitment firm industry is very, very variable. There are very good actors who are concerned about being fair to all parties, being ethical. And then there are some that are exploiting healthcare professionals. And so it's important that you do your research and due diligence up front. Before you sign a contract, because your rights are obviously much more limited once you put your pen to that paper. And so I think, how do you know? Well, a really good way to know is if they have the seal of the Alliance, that you can see on their website or elsewhere. You can ask the firm if they're certified by the Alliance, and that's kind of a way to quickly understand that this firm has committed to abiding by the code and to ensuring compliance, right? They allow for us to survey their healthcare professionals, to give our email address to provide independent advice like WorldWide's doing right now on this webinar with us, et cetera. So I think thinking about picking a firm that's ethical is really helpful. And it doesn't necessarily have to be certified by the Alliance. We're not saying you should do that, but it's a good way to find the right firm. And if they're not Alliance certified, then make sure that, we'll still look at our code and make sure whatever contract you're signing looks right based on that. Talk to friends and other people who've gone through the process who can give you their kind of objective opinion. And it might be helpful depending. Obviously, it can be prohibitive cost-wise, but to have a trusted local attorney review your contract as well. Also, of course, you can always email us. We're happy to take a look and provide independent kind of advice on that stuff. So looking related to that is looking at the contract terms, right? Where are you gonna be working? Do you know where you'll be working? How long is the contract? As Kaley mentioned, 3 years is kind of a standard contract. Some are a little bit less, but if they're longer, there should be a pretty good reason for that. What specialty? Are you working in an area that's in line with your expertise or where you want to progress with your career? And so I think everything doesn't be exactly the way you want it, but you want it to be, first you want to know what you're getting into. And secondly, you want to make sure that you're on the same page with the recruitment firm about those kind of key conditions about where you'll be working and where you'll be living. Beyond the contract, you need to think about how will this help me build my career development journey? I think there's some tendency, you're really excited for the next step in your life and to move to a country where you really want to build that life and career. But don't just sign the first contract that will get you to where you want to go to location-wise. Really think critically about how will this build my career development journey, right? Will I get the training I need? Is the job aligned to what I want to be doing or what they think I can be doing? And if it's not, am I willing to accept that trade-off? And will I get the progression opportunities that I'm looking to get? And finally, what trade-offs am I willing to accept? Right? I talked to some healthcare professionals who are like, well, I want to be in this city and I want to make, this kind of money and I want my family sponsored and I want to be an ICU nurse only, right? And it's good to have a list of the things that you want. But like with everything else, you have to prioritize. It's unlikely you'll get everything you want. So making sure what are the things that are really important to me and what are the things that I want, but I'm willing to give up so that I can find a placement and a recruitment firm that works for me overall. I think that's a helpful thing to think through so that you're able to take advantage of the opportunities that are offered to you by having some flexibility, but also recognizing what are the things that are deal breakers for you. And so hopefully that kind of provides some context about the types of questions you should be thinking about. And with that, I think we'll go into the Q&A. But before we do, I'd love to hear your questions. I see a bunch in the chat already. I want to talk about a couple kind of concepts that are have come up in the last year or so, right? The first is this idea of a nursing shortage. And, you'll hear that a lot in the global arena that there's, kind of a nursing shortage out there. In the US, a lot of it's nursing pocket shortages, right? So there's, I was at this conference of nursing workforce centers around the country. And there are really shortage pockets. In some areas, there are actually a good number of nurses and the demand and supply of nurses is roughly even. In other areas, there's kind of a maldistribution. Either there's not enough people like in rural areas or urban areas, or certain specialties might be missing people with certain levels of experience. And so that is helpful to understand because when people think there's a nursing shortage, they think there's no nurses everywhere, but it's really, there's variance. And so being understanding of that, and as someone who's moving here, thinking about where are the places where I might most be needed can be helpful. Then we'll talk about COVID. We didn't really talk about that because a lot of the lessons we have talked about are kind of universal and really applying in any context. In many parts of the world, I recognize, including where many of you are right now, COVID is still having a dramatic impact in terms of lifestyle lockdowns, all those things. It's also greatly affected how the immigration process is working right now. Most notably, in terms of the visa issuance process. So there's a couple issues that you should be aware of. One is when CGFNS does the credential evaluation, a lot of it's still done through postal mail. And what that means is that if schools are delayed, et cetera, there could be long delays with that. And in terms of getting interviews, for example, with consulates and things like that, there have been a lot of closures and delays in getting those interviews. So while there's a lot of demand, obviously, for healthcare professionals coming to the U.S., there are additional impediments than that there normally are in terms of coming here and getting through the actual nuts and bolts of getting your credential evaluation and then getting the interviews and stuff to get here. And in things like getting testing seats for NCLEX and stuff can also be difficult. So just be prepared for those issues as we still continue to grapple with those around the world. So I want to also summarize, what I talked about in the last slide, which is a lot about things to think about. So what to consider making a decision. Number one, you want to work with a recruiter you trust. And so that means looking for them to be transparent about what they expect of you and for them to be ethical, and whether that be looked by the Alliance seal or whatever else you need to make that criteria. You just want to be able to trust them because they'll be your partners in a very long, potentially process, and also one that's really where you're very vulnerable in a lot of ways. And then know what you're paying for upfront and later, right? So in some cases, a recruiter might cover a lot of those costs upfront, but if you are paying them, make sure you know that. And later on, right, Kaley mentioned breach fees when you terminate a contract early. Like if you are going to terminate, what will that entail? Are there other costs that I pay later? We'll have bench pay costs where if I'm not working, I'm not getting paid, even though I can't take another position. Again, understand all those costs and potential issues that might happen. As you saw in that survey, the vast majority of people, this is a very positive experience. So that's the good thing to know. But you want to protect yourself in case there's some issue, or to avoid the issues by picking a good recruiter in the first instance. And so I said, be clear on requirements. Where can I work, and for how long am I willing to work? So I think those are kind of the three key things in terms of the longer list that I provided earlier. And with that, would love to hear your questions, and we're happy to answer them. Also, whether you have this now or later, just note that email address, staff@cgfnsalliance.org. We're happy to answer questions that way, and also to schedule consultations if that would be helpful with you by phone or Zoom as well. Thank you so much, and looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much. Such an important topic for nurses to have all of the information they need to make really educated choices about their future. I will say I really do appreciate all of the points that you brought up on the importance of really picking the right organization, the recruiting organization that is accredited with the agency and the alliance. I know at WorldWide, being a part of this alliance, it really makes us hold ourselves to a much higher standard to make sure that we're always doing the best thing and we're an advocate for the nurses that are working with us. It's a really big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, as a nurse myself, I've been a nurse here in the United States for, 25 years. I've been licensed in probably 5 different states. And one of the things that I know is what I would expect in a contract, we make sure that our nurses that are foreign educated, trained, have those same things. So look into your contracts, make sure they have those fine details that Mukul mentioned today. in, what is your wage going to be? You should know that up front. We are a direct hire, so you will know where you're going to be working. That's really great if you have a family, if you want to settle down and make a long-term commitment to a community and become a member of that community. So working with reputable organizations is so important. Let me ask you this. What are some of the most common concerns that you see through the Alliance when nurses reach out to you?
I'll take that on. So first, yeah, that's a great point. And I think you're absolutely right. I kind of mentioned it, but I hope people got the point of staffing versus placement firms. That's a question, I think a lot of people don't even think about up front, but it's a very different model. And with a placement firm, you're able to know where you're going to be working, which is a huge advantage, right? Versus having to potentially move around and not know where you're working. That's just a lot more uncertainty around that. It also makes it harder to invest long term in the place you're working, right? If it's great to be able to develop, to know your coworkers, and to develop in a professional way as well. And I often hear people working at placement firms and staying on for quite a long time. Right. Mm-hmm. With the staffing firm model, it tends to be much more short-term assignments. So I think that's one thing I think that people should very much look at, and probably doesn't get enough attention when people are making a decision of which recruiter to work for, whether they're using staffing or placement firm. Yeah. In terms of the questions that we get all types of questions. And I think the biggest one, and I'll let Kaley kind of add her 2 cents on this, is around breaching and how to leave a contract. And the reason why we get that is because people haven't done something like this up front, right? They haven't really thought about how am I going to pick the recruiter and what do I need to know? And so I think what happens is when we get calls is very late in the process. A nurse is in the US working somewhere, and for some reason they're unhappy. Either their position isn't what they thought it would be. In some cases, they're subject to harassment at work or something where they really need to leave. But what do I do now is kind of the question. And how do I leave? And even, I've been threatening my employer. And so I think the number one thing I would say about all those questions is we can provide guidance then about their specific factual situation. But doing the kind of thought up front is this the place I want to work? What am I committing to? What will happen if I can't stay there? That's really helpful. And what do you think about the question?
No, I think you're right. I think the number one concern that we get is usually about fees, but the number one complaint we usually get is actually about USCIS. So the length of time that the process takes. We get a lot of questions about that and about whether or not that's something that is an issue with your recruiter or something that's just an issue with the immigration process. So we do hear that a lot from nurses, and a lot of times it doesn't come down on the recruiter. It's just the length of time for a lot of the processing. So.
Yeah. And I will share, as a recruiting organization, we really work closely with the USCIS. We have done value stream analysis to try to figure out the most efficient way for nurses to go through this process, because it is really complicated. And I'm proud of the team that we have built around making sure that we can answer all of those questions. For those of you that are worldwide nurses, look at those roadmaps that we provide, look at your arrival guides. We provide a lot of resources and information. The other thing that I think it's really important for nurses to know, when you're direct hire, when you arrive, you become the employee of the hospital or the healthcare system that you're working with. But please, if you feel like you're not getting the answers from your employer, you can always reach back out to your case manager, even if it's been months and we're no longer there to be your recruiter and your case manager, but you can reach back out to us, because we maintain really great relationships with all of our clients to make sure that they are servicing and fulfilling the contract that they committed to us and that they committed to you. So you do have a lot of advocates in this process, and we want to be a part of that for you. Another question that I have seen is, does the Alliance ever interact with POEA?
Great question. Yes is the answer. So we definitely work with the POEA. It tends to not be on specific issues around nurses, but more on policy issues. They've asked us about what we've thought about model contracts and other provisions that they've had. So certainly we've talked to POEA and also POLO, the Overseas Labor Offices, which is for those of you from the Philippines, there's a labor attaché who is also an additional resource who's in the embassies to talk about these types of issues.
Okay, excellent. And then I think we have touched on it, but what can a nurse do if they feel like their employer or their recruiter is not fulfilling their obligations? I know we have been able to send that over the email for you. Any other things that they can do or resources?
Yeah, I would say the first thing to do is to reach out to someone. So I think, often a lot of firms have grievance processes or a case manager or someone you can talk to. So I would always recommend you go to that person first and ask questions, raise your hand, make sure it's very clear that there is an issue so that it can be resolved. In the majority of cases, things can be resolved just by talking to the person, the recruiter, the employer. If for some reason that doesn't work, or if for some reason you don't feel comfortable or safe in doing that, then I would say reach out to someone who can help. So often I would recommend an attorney. That can be hard to do and expensive. So another resource is just to email us, and we can help. Kaley and I can at least understand your situation and give you some more specific advice given the kind of the details that you have of your situation.
And something to note, I'm sorry, Beth.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to note that if you reach out, it is confidential. We're not going to go to your firm without your permission. So you can reach out just for a question and it doesn't have to go any further than that. So just keep that in mind.
Right.
I think one of the things as a nurse that's really important is that when you do arrive, join some nursing organizations. So I'm very honored to be able to serve on the Board of Governors with the Alliance, but there's some amazing other Board of Governors members that are members of some larger organizations. So in the United States, there's the American Nurses Association. Any nurse here in the United States that's working can join that organization. You do not have to be born American to be a part of that. The organization has a lot of wonderful resources and education, and they lobby together for the best practices in nursing. So that's one organization. There's the Filipino Organization of Nurses. There's the Indian Association of Nurses. Any others that we can think of?
There are several others. Nigerian nurses, Hispanic nurses, the Asian Pacific Islanders. I think that's the big ones I can think of. But there are several organizations that the National Black Nurses Association as well. So depending on your kind of ethnic or national background, there are groups that kind of share information, have conferences, et cetera, and can be a great support system as well.
Right. And I agree. I think those are great support systems. Plus, the American Nurses Association, I think, is recognized by all of those associations. And one of the things that I think it's going to help you as a nurse now working in the United States is understanding what the laws and the requirements and the best practices are in the United States and for even your state. So this includes nurse to patient ratios, best practices in medication administration, the legal requirements around charting. So just a lot of wonderful resources. The other great thing as a resource for nurses to know is that at WorldWide HealthStaff, we actually provide some education prior to arrival to give you information on the U.S. healthcare system, because healthcare systems, as we know, between countries vary quite a bit. So reach out, ask those questions. The other big thing is around licensing. So one thing to remember is every state has their own licensing requirements, and that's different than going through USCIS. Once you get here, you have to get that license to work as a nurse in that state. So look for organizations that can support you in understanding those laws, because there's a lot of tricks to it.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I would also add, as kind of a little addition to that, is one of the biggest things I've heard from nurses who've made the journey from other countries to the U.S. is in the U.S. nurses are much more active team players often. So depends, of course, a lot by countries, but in a lot of countries, nurses have more of a task orientation where they listen to request orders from a doctor, for example. In the U.S., you're kind of a critical voice in the team, and so I think that's one thing to think about when you think about best practices adjusting is that stepping up and being kind of that nurse, that patient advocate at all stages of the process. People want to hear your thoughts and opinions. That can be a transition too.
All right. So I have a couple more questions that I'm going to share. So one comes in and it says, what are the negative effects of breaching our contracts? So these are nurses that maybe just want to move or not continue after they've arrived and they have been sponsored.
Correct. So that's going to be what we're talking about with the breach fees. If you breach your contract early, usually it should be said in the contract what that breach fee would be or how that breach fee is going to be calculated. At the Alliance, we do require that they be prorated over time. So depending upon how far you are in your contract, that would affect how much you're going to pay. But the chief impact of ending your contract early is going to be that you're going to have to pay a monetary amount to the firm.
Yeah. All right. The next question is, once a nurse comes and they fulfill their contract, so they have maybe a 3-year contract and the contract's completed, what then happens with that nurse?
Great question. I would say next is you find a job, right? So often it depends if you're at a placement firm like with WorldWide, you might stay on with your employer and work, longer term. A lot of other cases, if you're with a staffing firm, you'll find a position. Given the demand for the skills that people on this call have, after a couple of years of U.S. experience, it's relatively easy in this market to find a position that probably might even pay a little bit more than your first position. So I wouldn't worry about that piece of the process.
No, absolutely. I will say our clients are really eager to keep you on as a nurse. So you have the opportunity to go back to that client, extend your agreement with them, or just continue working. You would not be responsible anymore for any of the fees associated with it. So great question. Thank you for that one. One question that we have is, how do nurses pay back a sponsorship fee if they incur those? So maybe a nurse drops out in the middle of the process after they've signed a contract. So I will speak on behalf of WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions. So if you've signed a contract to go to an employer here in the United States, any fees that have been paid on behalf of your immigration, we would ask that you pay those back. So any of your filing fees would be paid back. The total fee would not be required because you haven't arrived and started, but just the actual fees paid on your behalf. Anything in addition that you could add to that?
Yeah, I would say this goes back to looking at your contract, right? The fees, that's a reasonable position is that, if you leave, that you pay the fees back. But just make sure that, when our breach fees triggered, right? Is it when you come to the U.S.? Is it when you first sign the contract? Being clear about that would be helpful for you just to know.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Can I contact an agency during the immigration process? For WorldWide, absolutely. Reach out to us. Every nurse is assigned a case manager to help them answer any of the questions. We can reference any of the questions you have with your immigration attorney. We can help that way. And if there's any questions that you have with the employer, we would ask you that you go through your case management for those because they do work with large contracts. We want to make sure that you're getting that consistent, correct information. All right. Next question is, I signed a contract from a staffing agency. It's been 2 years since I was recruited, but I'm stuck with them without any assigned facility. Can I get out of this contract?
Right. Great question. So I think that's where you definitely want to send us an email and let's talk to you about your details. It varies by contract. So a lot of these contracts actually don't let you leave even without a job, but I think you have a pretty good challenge on that. So let's understand your case individually, but this also reinforces that's really important up front to understand what you're signing and what will happen under different scenarios if you decide you don't want to get it, if you don't have a job, etc. So please email us and we'll talk about the details.
Right. And, I think one of the goals is that it's a great partnership. So we want to support the nurses through this process. We want to make sure that they're getting here, they're getting all of the fees that they have been committed to them. But at the same time, we want to make sure that our clients continue to recruit nurses from abroad. And that happens when nurses come and they fulfill their contract and they're good stewards as well. So I think with the right contracts in place, that relationship can continue to remain strong in the United States. All right. And then I will share one more question. How do I know the location I should choose? Would there be location guidelines in that? So I'll share a fun story. We had a multiple list of locations that one of our large healthcare providers was offering. A nurse was told that Chicago was a great place to work, which it is. But then the nurse said, I want to go to Chicago. I think it's a great place to work, but I don't like cold weather. And for those of you that may not be familiar with Chicago is a very cold climate. So what we encourage nurses to do at WorldWide, we have hundreds of nursing positions available today in all parts of the country. So some of the things that we would ask of you is, do you have family in the United States? Is there a certain demographic of the country that you would like to be a part of? Do you like warm weather or cold weather? Our goal is to put you in a location that's going to be a really good long-term fit for you and your family. If you don't like cold weather, let's find a place maybe in the southern states for you. If you really love snow and you like that big city environment, we have those too. But finding the right fit is a really important thing for every individual. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that you're exactly right. And it's one of the things that comes up the most in our surveys. So I think that when you say that that's a really important part of having longevity in an area, it can really affect how happy someone is in an area and if they want to stay on after the term of their contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We want everyone to be happy with their location and happy with their employer. I will share most employers. How the contracts work is if your employer has multiple locations throughout the United States, the individual location that you have signed on with is the location that is paying for your immigration fees. It's not the company as a whole all the time. So that particular location is going to want you to fulfill your contract throughout the 3 years. But once you're completed with your contract, many of those companies will let you move to other locations within their company. So be mindful of that. I hope that helps. The last question, I did have one more come in. If my contract ends, can an agency find me another job? And I will say with WorldWide, absolutely. We're always happy to help you find another job or help you manage your relocation as well. And I think that's the same for staffing agencies as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can surely work with your agency to find another position at that point.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you guys would like to add as we wrap up our session today?
I would just add, I've seen a couple questions that are more specific to an individual situation. So if you still have questions about those, just send us an email and we can get some more details and provide kind of more personalized answers on those.
Okay.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add is, I hope you found this useful. I think this shows you that, there are firms like WorldWide that are really concerned about working with you on your journey, and that you have groups like the Alliance that are here to support you with that as well. So take advantage of those resources. They can be really helpful in helping you make the right decisions for your career and your family.
Right. No, absolutely. So I will reiterate, if you have any questions or concerns about the ethical behavior of your staffing agency or the recruiting agency, anything that you need additional support to, feel free to reach out to your individual case manager. You can escalate it to me, whatever you need to do with Worldwide. But if you want to reach out to the Alliance, the contact is staff@CGFNSalliance.org. Kaley will most likely be the one answering those questions. She's going to be there to support you. I have had the great opportunity to get to meet with this team, and I know that foreign educated nurses is the highest priority, making sure that you are cared for and get the treatment that you want. If you're looking for a position and to have this opportunity to migrate and go through the immigration process, WorldWide HealthStaff Solutions would love to be a part of that journey with you. So you can reach out with your CV to recruiting@healthstaff.org. We are recruiting hundreds of nurses all over the country. We are looking for those NCLEX prepared nurses, but we will also be happy to work with the non-NCLEX as we help you prepare for those next steps. Ask your case managers for an arrival guide to the United States. There's so many great points of information on acclimating and understanding the culture in the United States, including, how to open a bank account or get an apartment or get a car, enroll your children in our public school system, and understanding our healthcare system. Just so many great details. But we would love to work with you. We wish you guys all the best. We hope that you have found great value in this presentation. The more educated that you are, the more empowered you are to make the right decision for yourself. So thank you so much today for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we hope that your journey to the United States is a successful one, and we wish you all the best.
All right. Thank you, Beth.